As you find your seat, you can find your place in John chapter 4. John chapter 4, and we're going to be looking at the woman at the well. Last week we were kind of looking at a more, if you will, philosophical or intellectual discussion that was taking place between Jesus Christ and Nicodemus. And the thing that Nicodemus needed to understand, was his lost condition. And so he had to be brought to a place of repentance, understanding that his works were never going to measure up to the finished work of Jesus Christ. Well, now we turn over to the next chapter. And we're going to see a very different discussion taking place, one that is far more emotionally charged, because I believe that the woman at the well, she was already in a place where she understood she was a sinner. She understood that, she was in trouble, but she didn't have any real hope. There were very, very strong feelings that we see as we're reading through this passage, and it's something that I kind of want to bring out as we're reading the passage is what she is saying, and what's being discussed. These aren't passive statements that have nothing to do with her. These aren't, ideas. This is where she lived. This is her entire mindset about herself, about the people around her, about, who she is, who God is, and it hardened into, I think, almost, a sarcastic, almost a bitterness that she had because of these broken hopes that had, and her heart was broken over and over again. Isaiah chapter 61, verse number 1, "The Spirit of the Lord God is upon me, because the Lord hath anointed me to preach good tidings unto the meek. He has sent me to bind up the brokenhearted, to proclaim liberty to the captives, and the opening of the prison to them that are bound." I think Nicodemus, he felt captive, by his works. It was never enough. It was never going to be good enough. But the woman at the well, she was brokenhearted. I think she's an obvious case for the brokenhearted. Now, this is jumping ahead, but I think we're all familiar with who the woman at the well is. But she went through 5 different marriages. I think of marriage and that marriage covenant, that life that is going to be shared with somebody, and the hopes and the dreams that you have in that other person, that solution to loneliness that so often many people face. And then that marriage dissolves, and it leads to a broken heart. And one marriage, falling apart, I can't imagine. We don't know. Maybe there was, some that, they had passed away and she was a widow. We don't really understand. The connotation that is there doesn't seem to indicate that that's the case. But she went through 5 marriages, 5 different failed attempts at this marriage relationship with this hope, at the marriage altar looking forward. And in each case, those hopes were dashed time and time again, to where she ended up living with a man who was not even her husband. And so we see a woman that has been terribly brokenhearted over the years. And we see Jesus Christ came to find her as well, came to talk to her, came to have some individual time one-on-one, and he absolutely cared. Maybe she'd been wondering over the years as she's going through these failed marriages, and we don't know whose fault is who. There's no point in going over it, but maybe she even wondered at those times, where is God in this? Where is he when I need him? And he came. And he offered her exactly what she needed. It wasn't what she expected. It wasn't what she was necessarily thinking that she needed, but he gave her more than she would ever know. And I believe that. I really, truly believe that when Jesus Christ gives us the gift of salvation, he has given us more than we will ever know, because I can't even begin to comprehend eternity. I can't begin to comprehend, who God is. And what I mean by that is he is an infinite God. How can my finite mind ever comprehend an infinite God? How can I ever comprehend the fullness of the love of God? I will go throughout all eternity learning more and experiencing more of the fullness of God without ever reaching the end. God gives us far more than we will ever know. And that is a huge blessing. That is a massive privilege. And I can't wait, to spend eternity unraveling the mystery of who God is. It's going to be such a blessing to be in his presence forevermore. But here we see Jesus Christ coming to this woman and reaching out to someone who has been hurting, who is, currently hurting. Here's a stranger, and she's kind of snapping at the start. We'll see in a second, but for a little bit of context, John chapter 4, verses 4 through 5, the Bible tells us this. Well, we'll start in verse number 3. He left Judea and departed again into Galilee. So he left the place of Judea. We'll look at a map in a moment, And the Bible says, and he must needs go through Samaria. Then cometh he to a city of Samaria, which is called Sychar, near to the parcel of ground that Jacob gave to his son Joseph. Now, the Bible here says, that he must needs go through Samaria, but I just want to say, you don't have to go to Samaria in order to get to where you're going. Okay, now it is the most direct route. Okay, this was a typical and probably the same path that Jesus Christ had taken many times before. Okay, it is a straight shot, from Galilee back down to Jerusalem right there. And Jesus Christ, growing up in a Jewish household, there would have been the three major feasts that would have required, that all the males appear before the Lord. Okay, and so this was the direct path. This was the direct route. This was a city that Jesus Christ potentially had gone through at least 3 times a year since he was about 12 years old. That's when the responsibility to appear in the temple would have begun. And Jesus Christ was 12 years old when we first see him, in the temple talking to the doctors. He may have gone beforehand, with his parents. Very, very likely that his father would have probably taken him along, but it wasn't required until that point. Anyway, the point is he's made this trip likely dozens of times, okay? The parcel that is being talked about here, was a gift from Jacob to Joseph. Okay, when Jacob at the very end of his life, he's talking to Joseph and he said, this is the portion that I've taken of the Amorites with my bow. And he gave Joseph that extra blessing. This is that parcel of land. A very interesting historical note, this is actually where Joseph first sought his brothers who had left before being sold as a slave. So just kind of, understanding the lay of the land. Joseph was going to go find his brothers. He came up to this place of Sychar. That's where his brothers were supposed to be feeding the sheep. They were not there. He pursued after them. That's when he sold to the Midianites. And his dad gave him that land that he originally went to when he was being faithful. So it's just kind of a cool parcel of ground. Here is the map of Palestine. Sychar was originally called Shechem. Now the name was changed from Shechem to Sychar, and I'll explain why in just a minute here. But this is where Levi and Simeon killed over their sister Dinah, where they went and they killed all the men of Shechem, and that's when Jacob took that parcel of land. This is also the same place where Rehoboam angered the Israelites in the kingdom split. So it was in Shechem where Rehoboam said, my father chastised you with whips, I'll chastise you with scorpions, and the kingdom split. And it was about that point, that Shechem began to have a very bad reputation. It was associated with the northern kingdom of Israel, which was constantly plunging into sin, and it was a major city up there. Later on, when the Jews, the southern kingdom of Judah, when they were taken captive and going into Babylon, there was a remnant of Israel that stayed and intermingled with the people, got into idolatry, and we even talked about them. They were talking about the lions of the place and so wanted to learn the laws of the God that went before. Anyway, so they started intermingling with the peoples that were there, and they became the Samaritans, otherwise known as these half-Jews. And so the Samaritans, and when the Jews came back into the land, they rebuilt the temple. They would not let those half-Jews come back in and have a part of it, because as you see with Nehemiah and those guys, like, no, you have to have the lineage, that has stayed pure and did not intermingle as God commanded. So anyway, this had been a blood feud for hundreds of years at this point. You can see it'd be, on your right-hand side, that land of Perea. So typically, like if you were a Pharisee, you didn't go through Samaria. So Jerusalem is on the very bottom of that map. You can see up north Galilee at the very top. And so Sychar is right sandwiched in between on the road from Jerusalem up to Galilee. But typically the Pharisees, they would go through the land of Perea all the way around, cross the Jordan River up into Decapolis, and then cut over into Galilee so as to avoid Samaria. So you have to understand, like, they hated one another's guts. You even see it later on with the parable with the Samaritan, the Good Samaritan. You just didn't mess with Samaritans. You didn't have any dealings with Samaritans. You gave a wide berth to the Samaritans. Anyway, also, just so you can see on there, on the very tip of Decapolis on the Jordan River, that's Aenon. So that's where John the Baptist was baptizing, just while we're here. All right, John chapter 4, verses 6 through 7. Now Jacob's well was there. Jesus, therefore, being wearied with his journey, sat thus on the well, and it was about the 6th hour. There cometh the woman of Samaria to draw water. Jesus saith unto her, Give me to drink. Now the well was apparently situated really close to the road, and Christ, who lived as a man and experienced, the needs of a man, at this point was exhausted. He was thirsty, and so they're going to stop there. Now this road kind of goes right straight on through, and you don't have to actually go into the city. This is why Jesus Christ sent his disciples into the city, But the well is kind of situated by the road, a little outside of town. Anyway, he sent his disciples to go give provision, which would not have been very comfortable for them. I mean, later on, we still see Peter after the fact, wanting to have no intermingling with the Gentiles, nothing unclean. And so imagine Jesus Christ sending his disciples, go to the Samaritans and buy some food. Are you sure, Lord? Yep. I need you guys to get out of here. There's something else I need to do. Anyway, there was an appointment that he was going to hold. The Bible tells us particularly the time. It was about the 6th hour, which is not 6 a.m. They structured their time differently. That's noon. That is lunchtime. So this is the time that people are going to be eating. We see Jesus Christ is ready to eat. He sent his disciples to go get something to eat. And this woman approaches the well at this time. Now, we're familiar again with the sin of adultery this woman had been committing, and had been, committing for quite some time. This was not the time where someone goes to draw water. This is a time where no one else is going to be around. This is a time where she would have been alone. And we see her going alone. Imagine, again, this is a pretty well-known town. I mean, Shechem is a place that appears multiple times in the Bible. Oh, I forgot to tell you why it was called Sychar. The name Shechem was changed to Sychar, because it means drunkard. And so the Jews called that the city of drunkards. That's why it's called Sychar. It means drunkenness, traitor, where just completely unstable. So that's why it became Sychar. So just understanding the Jewish mindset of this place, and imagine being called, drunkards. And that's just where you're from. Anyway, so here he is at the well. She comes by herself, apparently enough of a social pariah that there were no other ladies that were even going with her, and it was typical to go in groups to go to the well and draw water and work together. She's by herself. She is avoiding people. She was probably an outcast even in that community in Samaria, and here Jesus Christ is sitting there waiting by the well. John chapter 4, verses 8 through 9, "For his disciples were gone away into the city to buy meat. Then saith the woman of Samaria unto him, How is it that thou, being a Jew, askest drink of me, which am a woman of Samaria? For the Jews have no dealings with the Samaritans." The very first thing that catches her off guard, she can tell he's a Jew. And he asks her for a drink of water. Now we look at that and just, if we don't know the background and the historical context of what's taking place here, we could look at that as if it's no big deal. He's just asking for a drink of water. This isn't, a massive problem. But the Jews didn't ask anything of the Samaritans. You go back and you read some of the rabbinical writings about the Samaritans from that time period, and you can find these texts where they talk about the Samaritans. They had rules. So, for example, you were not allowed to buy a boiled egg from a Samaritan, but you were allowed to buy a raw egg. You were not allowed to buy baked bread from a Samaritan. However, you were allowed to buy, the wheat or the grain or stuff like that. And the idea was, the raw materials were okay. But if you bought something that they had touched or prepared or worked with, that made you unclean to eat that. Anything that they touched or dealt with at all, that is disgusting to you. You stay far away from that. Again, the Pharisees would take days extra to go around to make sure they didn't have to be around them. Many rabbis at that time taught that they had no part in the resurrection. There was no salvation. If you were Samaritan, that's it. You are cast off from God. You will never stand before him. You are alienated. And so, imagine coming, up to somebody, where, let's just be honest, there's been a history of racism going on, and Jesus Christ asks for a drink of water. This woman knows you're not a Samaritan. What are you doing? You're asking me? This is extremely unusual. It's unorthodox. And so she is immediately suspicious. What are you doing here? What do you want from me? And I'm just going to be honest, as we're talking about, the spiritual truths that we can glean from this, sometimes when Christ approaches a person and we see, here's his goodness, here is God, people, because of the hardness of their life or because of the experiences of their life, they look at God with absolute suspicion. What do you want from me? Look at the course of my life and everything that I've experienced. It's enough. What are you here for? Do you want something from me? Is there something in it for you? And there's many different people that, look at God the same way. You just want to control my life, or, you just want my tithe money, or you just want this, you just want that. And so they eye God with suspicion, not knowing really why he is there. And Jesus Christ, he knows that she's looking at him with the suspicious, what do you want from me? And again, when you understand, her past with men, hey, she has reason in her perspective, in her mind, ignorant of the person of God, to be suspicious of the stranger at this well. Verse number 10, notice how Jesus Christ answers. He's not hard on her. He's in fact very, very gentle. Verse number 10, Jesus answered and said unto her, If thou knewest the gift of God, and who it is that saith to thee, Give me to drink, thou wouldest have asked of him, and he would have given thee living water. Now again, in context, this woman thought that Christ had nothing to do with her, and so she'd have nothing to do with him. Nicodemus was, approaching to Jesus Christ saying, what am I supposed to do? What is the thing I should do? Okay, this Samaritan woman is looking at Jesus Christ like there's nothing to be done. Me and you, we have no dealings together. We are far apart. We are alienated. We are not close whatsoever. Okay? And believe that nothing could be done. The divide was too great. I mean, we're talking about hundreds of years of history of hate and hurt and problems and dismissiveness. And so here to have this approach, hey, again, she's kind of taken off guard at first, but then Jesus Christ, to lower those defenses and try and put her mind at ease, and he's like, look, I know I asked you for a drink of water, but if you were to ask me, I would give it to you. If you knew who you were talking to, you would ask of me, and I would give you. And I wouldn't just give you this water. Hey, I would give you this living water, a spiritual water, something that was for the refreshing of her soul and spirit, not for her body. And I want to set that in context. This is what Jesus Christ is talking about. Now, she didn't get that at first. Verses 11 through 12. The woman saith unto him, Sir, thou hast nothing to draw with, and the well is deep. From whence then hast thou that living water? Art thou greater than our father Jacob, which gave us the well, and drank thereof himself, and his children, and his cattle? I think she perceived the kindness of Christ, and so her curiosity is piqued, but she still saw it as being impossible. How are you going to do this? You don't have anything to draw with. You're going to give me living water? And again, she's from this area. She's been around the block. And where is this living water going to come from? It's likely when Jesus Christ, said living water, what she was thinking is there's some kind of fresh spring somewhere that's bubbling forth, that she could go and get this, fresh spring water versus, dipping down into the well. And she doesn't know of any such spring. There's nothing like that around there. They've been using this same well forever. Hey, what do you have is better than this? And this is all I got. Hey, are you greater than our father Jacob? And so I think she saw okay, his intentions are good, but is he actually capable of delivering on what he promised? You have nothing to draw with. Oftentimes I think when people approach Jesus Christ and the message of salvation, they wonder, how is this possible? With all their life experience and all the different difficulties they've gone through, how is this possible that the love of God would somehow reach out to me? After all the hurt, after all the hardship, after all the broken hopes, hey, nothing else could satisfy. How is this going to be any better? How is this going to actually answer that problem? And I know I'm speaking primarily to a saved audience. I hope every person here is already saved. Okay, where we look at that and we go, of course, it's Jesus Christ. He can answer our needs. He can supply our want. He can absolutely do that. But to someone who doesn't know the power of God, doesn't know the goodness of God, it can seem like a completely alien concept. How is God going to love me? I don't think she thought very highly of herself. I'm just going to be honest, okay? Because again, the way that she allowed herself to be treated through 5 divorces, okay, and again, living with the man that was not her husband, I don't think her esteem was very high. I don't think she looked at herself as this paragon of virtue and of righteousness. I think she saw herself as irredeemable for the most case. I think she already saw herself as being lost. How can you reach me? How can you plumb to these depths? You have nothing to draw with. You can't go that far. You can't reach that far, to pluck me from where I am. Hey, and continuing, art thou greater than our father Jacob? I've tried. Oftentimes people, they don't understand the love of God, but they'll go to their religion and they're like, yeah, that religion didn't work for me. You ever talk to somebody that said religion didn't work for me? It doesn't work for anybody. I'm just letting you know. Religion does not work. Okay? A relationship with Christ works. And so often people are turned away from the living God, okay, the living water, Jesus Christ himself, the person of God, because they've gotten so caught up in some ritual or some rite, and they perform the ritual and nothing happened. What makes your ritual better? What makes your religion better? And that's what they're looking at. They don't see the person. Again, the entire idea from the very beginning, and Jesus Christ gives us the answer from the very beginning, if you knew who you were talking to. The problem was she did not know who she was talking to. Jesus Christ said, I'll already meet that need. I'll do it. I'll give you the living water. I'll give it to you right now. But she was so distracted by, the impossibility of her own situation, so distracted by, the failure of what she already had to satisfy forever, that she didn't think it was even possible to begin with. Verses 13 through 14, Jesus answered and said unto her, whosoever drinketh of this water shall thirst again. Of course, speaking of the well. But whosoever drinketh of the water that I shall give him shall never thirst. But the water that I shall give him shall be in him a well of water springing up into everlasting life. Now here we can see Jesus Christ is making it abundantly clear. He is talking about eternal life. She's looking at her lot in life, and she's probably thinking this is as good as it gets. This is it. This is all we have. Okay, so I'm just hoping for a good day today. I just want a little bit of this well water so I can go back, and live my life as best as I see fit because, I've already been rejected by the community. I've been rejected by the Jews. I've been rejected by God. I'm just rejected across the board, so I'm just trying to get by day. Okay, and so this is all that there is. And Jesus Christ reminds her, but that doesn't last. I think all too often we're too concerned with going from oasis to oasis in life for our peace and for our joy, trying to find something to get us through the day. If I can just get through the day, maybe tomorrow will be better. Maybe next week will be better. Maybe next month will be better. And so we drag ourselves through life just hoping that things are going to get better. But I want to let you know that is not how this life works. We fall apart. Hardships continue to come. Okay? There's always going to be another issue. I think I've mentioned this before, but have you ever been sick and you have a stuffy nose? And you're just clogged up to high heaven. You just think, if I could just breathe again, how much better life would be. And then, it works itself loose. And then you have the cough, for who knows how long. And hey, you're not stuffed up anymore. Congratulations. Hey, now you have a cough to deal with. Hey, and so finally the cough is gone, and then you get the doctor's bills. Hey. It's like, oh man, this is worse. Give me back the cough. Hey, you pay the bills, but now you have to go to work and you have to overwork to make it up, which makes yourself sick, and then the process continues ad infinitum, okay? It just never satisfies. And there are times where you think, like, this is it. I will be satisfied. You go to a Chinese buffet. You eat until you're like, I will never eat again. And then you're hungry at dinner. It's just the reality. These wells, they always lead to more thirsting. They always lead to more being needed. And understand everything in this life, every pursuit of the flesh that we may have, that we look at this world and we say, this is it, this is the well, this is what will satisfy, we're wrong. It will not. For a moment, it will tide us over, but it will never truly satisfy. If something is satisfied, that means it is complete, it is finished, it is entire. We're never satisfied in this life. There's always this desire for more, and Jesus Christ said, no, I'm going to give you something that you don't have to constantly take from outside and pour in to constantly keep yourself going. No, I'm going to give you something within that is going to pour out. That's wonderful. What an incredible promise that we can have. And I don't know if she fully understood it at this point, but, kind of spoiler alert, she did. Verses 15 through 16, the woman saith unto him, Sir, give me this water that I thirst not, neither come hither to draw. Jesus saith unto her, Go, call thy husband, and come hither. Wouldn't it be great to no longer need the things of this world to get by? Where it doesn't matter what really happens on the outside, we're okay. A peace that the world cannot take away, to be able to rejoice forevermore. And again, I'm not talking about the satisfying of the flesh. I'm talking about the satisfaction of the soul, of the spirit. Something that is far greater and something that is far more needful. Not to have to struggle and toil ceaselessly in the flesh for a temporary satisfaction that will not last. Well, in order for us to have that, we have to be taken away those temporary fixes. She says, Sir, give me this water. Now remember, Jesus Christ said, if you knew who asked you, you would ask me and I would give you. If we stopped right here, we could say, look, she asked him, but he didn't give quite yet. There had to be something that was stripped away. There had to be something that was removed. There had to be a realization within her. And she was never going to fully appreciate the love of God and the goodness of God until she fully realized the wretchedness of those wells that she was going to for satisfaction. Okay? And so Jesus Christ brings up the big one. I mean, right away, he just dives right in. I so appreciate that. There is no beating around the bush. We are in the deep end of the pool right now. Jesus saith unto her, Go, call thy husband, and come hither. You know, this is something that apparently she'd been trying to fix, that hole in her life, that feeling of loneliness and rejection that ultimately stemmed from her, distance from God. And she'd been trying to patch it, in this case, with men. And there's different things that we can try and patch it with. Hey, there's not superior and inferior. Okay, people that try and fill that God-shaped hole, it could be money, it could be toys, it could be, vacations, whatever it may be, work. Hey, we try and fill that hole. Those things need to be stripped away and said, this needs to be identified. It needs to be rejected so that we can receive the Lord Jesus Christ. She was trying to find something of value when she's trying to find these husbands. And yet it only made her cheaper. It just cheapened her. And it made her feel that way as she went along. And I just want to say, every well that we go to our satisfaction, the more that we realize it doesn't satisfy, the worse off we're going to feel. It's like being in the middle of the ocean and drinking ocean water to try and satisfy thirst. For a moment, it may feel like, things are going to get better. But in the end, it only serves to, kill you a little bit faster and to make you feel even thirstier. Don't drink seawater. Don't go to the world for the satisfying of your soul. It just makes things worse. Verses 17 through 18, the woman answered and said, I have no husband. I think those are really emotionally loaded words. Hey, I want you to imagine, put yourself in the woman at the well's shoes at this point. And here, this man that's offering this water says, call thy husband. What would be racing through your mind in that moment? Probably 5 different husbands that failed. In some way, shape, or form, those marriages failed. And those were probably what caused the blotch on her reputation to the point where she wasn't even comfortable being around the other women at the well. And so this was, kind of a major aspect of her life. And just because she was a Samaritan doesn't mean they didn't have standards. Like, this was not appropriate in Samaria, okay? And so she knew it, they knew it, everyone knew it, okay? And so as soon as she hears that, everything would come rushing back to her head, including the current relationship that she had with a man who was not her husband. Jesus said unto her, Thou hast well said, I have no husband. Jesus Christ said, True, you don't have a husband. Okay? It's not as comforting as you think it would be, right? You're right, you don't have a husband. Okay? For thou hast had 5 husbands, and he whom thou now hast is not thy husband, and that sayest thou truly. Now, the Bible never tells us that there was a pause in between what Jesus Christ said here and what the woman said next, but I imagine it would take a moment to kind of recollect yourself after something like that. Hey, I'm going to need to breathe for a second because my mind and my heart would be racing. How do you know that? How in the world could you know everything that I've done? And we see later on she's talking about this, but Jesus Christ here is not just picking at her because, hey, he can pick at her. He's not, attacking her personally, because he wants to see her hurting. No, he's trying to take away the crutch so that she will lean on him. These guys are not the answer. Jesus Christ is the answer. Okay? And for her to ever really truly understand the depth of God's love, she needs to understand the depth of her sin. And so Jesus Christ points it out. And I also want to say the reason he does this is to give her hope. If Jesus Christ did not identify the depravity that she had done, saying, I know, what hope would she have when he said, I can save? You have to know the diagnosis and the prognosis before you understand the level of healing. If he had come along and said, no, I can save you, I promise. And she says, but you don't know what I've done. And Jesus Christ said, it doesn't matter, I can save you anyway. He's going to come off as ignorant to her. However, when he approaches her and says, yeah, look, I can give you eternal life. And I know you've had 5 husbands, 5 divorces, and the man you're living with now, he's not your husband. Yeah, I can still do that. I can still save. He comes from a position of absolute 100% knowledge and surety, so that when any sinner is in the depths of their sin, the chiefest of sinners, Jesus will save. It is not because Jesus Christ is ignorant to what we have done. No, he knows full well. The question is, do you know what he has done? Do you know the extent of his love? And so without diagnosing the sin and stating exactly and precisely what it is that we have done, we have no hope of healing. But when Jesus Christ confronts us and says, I know, and I can still do it, we can have hope and confidence like nothing else. Verses 19 through 20, the woman saith unto him, Sir, I perceive that thou art a prophet. Perceptive lady. Our fathers worshipped in this mountain, and ye say that in Jerusalem is the place where men ought to worship. This is what we call changing the subject. Okay? I mean, this had nothing to do with anything whatsoever. Okay? And I still wonder what Jesus Christ's reaction was to this. I mean, he loves this lady dearly. He's there for this appointment. Okay? There is a reason he is there. Okay? And there's part of me that looks at it and says, it's kind of funny, okay? But it's also not. Okay? And what I mean by it's not is we're getting away from, what we're trying to get to. But it's also, it's like, got him. Okay? I'm just letting you know, okay? When you're fishing, okay, and you hook a fish, there's a moment when the fish realizes that it's hooked, okay? And it'll start jumping and getting any way you can, but it's like, no, I have you now, okay? The hook was already set in this lady's heart and soul, okay? She's just trying anything to kind of desperately get away, and so what does she go to? Back to the old blood feud, back to the old hurt, something that was completely, had nothing to do with anything, and Jesus Christ was having nothing to do with it. Verses 21 through 22, Jesus saith unto her, Woman, believe me, the hour cometh when ye shall neither in this mountain, nor yet at Jerusalem worship the Father. Ye worship ye know not what. We know what we worship, for salvation is of the Jews. Now, Christ responds to her calling him a prophet. He says, okay, I'm a prophet. Here's a prophecy for you. You're not going to be worshiping in this mountain, nor are you going to be worshiping in Jerusalem. You're going to be worshiping the Father directly. This woman who had been constantly alienated her entire life, who felt this separation from God, from man, from her fellow neighbors, and here, Jesus Christ nonchalantly saying, yeah, it's not about any of that kind of stuff. You're getting caught in the weeds, okay? You can have a direct relationship with God. You can go to him one-on-one. Not based upon who you are, but based upon who he is. And so here she has excuses, and oftentimes there's always excuses. And when you're witnessing to somebody and you're trying to teach them about the things of God, oftentimes there's going to be these random excuses that get thrown up. That just means that you're going in the right direction. Okay? It's a blockade, so you can't get to where you're going. It's like in the chase scene when someone throws a broom behind them. Hey, you don't just veer off and go after like, I got to pick that up. No, jump right over and continue the hunt. Okay? And so Jesus Christ, he is seeking after this woman and said, no, this is between me and you. Forget about this stuff. Okay, forget about all this other nonsense. Hey, and I just want to encourage you, sometimes when you're witnessing to somebody, they will go off into something in the past or way off that has nothing to do with anything. Hey, it's a relationship. Go back to the relationship and say, look, here's the thing. You don't know what you're worshiping. You don't know who you're worshiping. You need to know God. Let's get back to the main thing. Everything else will make itself clear over time. Let's get back to the relationship with God. Verses 23 through 24, but the hour cometh, and now is, when the true worshipper shall worship the Father in spirit and in truth. For the Father seeketh such to worship him. God is a spirit, and they that worship him must worship him in spirit and truth. There is nothing preventing her from being right with God right now. The hour cometh, and now is. You can have that right now. Hey, I think of this woman, 5 failed marriages, an adulterous affair, leaving her alone at the well, speaking to a Jew who she believes is racist against her, knowing she's alienated from God by just about every conceivable measure in her worldview. Hey, and then Christ says she can have that relationship with God now. It doesn't matter. Right now, you can have that relationship. And in fact, not only can you have that relationship, he is seeking after you. She had no idea how true that statement was. The Father is seeking such to worship him. Jesus Christ always did the will of the Father. He must needs go through Samaria. Jesus Christ being there and speaking to that woman was proof, absolute proof, that the Father was seeking after her. Here she felt lost. That's what she felt, this alienation. That's what it means to be lost, to be cast away, to be distant from God. And she recognized that she was in a lost condition, but she did not recognize that Jesus Christ, God in the flesh, was seeking after her personally, individually. That God wanted her. God is a spirit, and they that worship him must worship him in spirit and in truth. Forget the flesh. This is in spirit. Going back to Nicodemus for just a second here, the problem that Nicodemus had is he thought he had to do something. There was some deed in the flesh that would make him right with God. And if he just did the right deed in the flesh, then things would be better. You must be born again. The flesh is the flesh, the spirit is the spirit. Now we take this same principle and we apply it to the woman at the well. She wasn't looking at things, to do. She's looking at what she had done. You know what Jesus Christ says? That's the flesh. We're putting off the deeds of the flesh. We're mortifying the deeds of the flesh. This is the spirit. That's death. This is life. Doesn't matter what you've done. Doesn't matter what your sins are. The work of God is well able to overcome anything that man might do, any sin that man is capable of. There is one sin, and we're not going to spend any time on this, that cannot be forgiven, and that's the rejection of the Holy Spirit. Rejecting the forgiveness of God is the unpardonable sin. Everything else can be pardoned. It can be forgiven. And this is what Jesus Christ is making apparent to her. The woman saith unto him, I know that Messiah cometh, which is called Christ. When he is come, he will tell us all things. One last appeal in order to stave off hope. Okay, not now, later. Hey, I'll believe. I just need to know the Messiah is coming. If I just have the Messiah, if I just have him. Now again, she already recognizes that Jesus Christ is a prophet. And so she's ready to believe when he makes this statement. Jesus saith unto her, I that speak unto thee am he. That is cool. I mean, imagine being this woman at the well. I think her hidden deep hope, way, 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 way buried down, that she didn't let anyone else know, that hope was that one day the Messiah would appear, that he would reveal himself to her. When he comes, he'll make it clear. When he comes, he'll give me the answer. When he comes, I'll finally know what it is. If I just had the Messiah. Remember what Jesus Christ said at the very, very beginning? If thou knewest the gift of God, and who it is that saith to thee, give me to drink, thou wouldest have asked of him. Okay? He said from the very beginning, if you knew who I was, you'd ask me. You know what that is? That is a knowledge of the person that Jesus Christ was talking to. He knew her. He knew what her ultimate hope was, that the Messiah would come. Jesus Christ, knowing he's the Messiah, said to her, yeah, look, if you knew who I was, you'd ask me. Once she knew who he was, she asked him. He knew her. He knew her from the very beginning. And I just want to say, just in case there is someone here today that has never received the gift of salvation because you believe you're alienated from God, he doesn't know you, he doesn't care about you, you're wrong. And I want to say that with all the love that I can possibly have. You're wrong. He knows you. He wants you. And he knows from the very beginning he's the answer. He's the solution. He can take care of the sin problem. He is the Messiah. He is the anointed one. He is the Christ. Verses 27 through 28. And upon this came his disciples and marveled that he talked with the woman. Yet no man said, what seekest thou? Or why talkest thou with her? The woman then left her water pot and went her way into the city and saith to the men. We're going to close with this verse here. Hey, but again, he said at the very beginning, if you knew who I was, you'd ask of living water. And what did she do? She asked. She received. You say, how do you know? Because she left her water pot. I love that snippet. I'm just going to be honest. I mean, in the grand cosmic scale of things, things that really matter, that are important, that, have a direct effect on our life, the fact that she left her water pot behind does not seem like it's a major doctrinal thing. It doesn't seem like it's very important. There's many different things that get left behind. There's many different things that, take place. I wonder, for example, later on in the ministry of like Peter, James, John, as these guys are going out and ministering and serving all around the region, as Paul is going out, and did he meet up with her again? Do we see later, interactions taking place with the woman at the well? John, he got this testimony from someone, and it's possible it could be from Jesus Christ, but what if it's actually from the woman at the well? Okay? I believe there was likely a church that was eventually started there. No, I could be wrong, but later on we see because of the testimony of this woman, there were many people in Samaria. And if you remember the Great Commission to start in Jerusalem, Samaria. Why wouldn't there be a church here? I mean, this is right on the way from Jerusalem, going up to the northern parts. And so I believe there were interactions there, but we'll never know until we get to heaven because they really don't matter. But the woman leaving her water pot there, that matters. There's a reason that is there. She came thirsty and she left full, never having taken a sip from that old well. Amazing. And when we go to Jesus Christ, we can leave our water pot too. We can walk away being completely satisfied again in the spirit and in the soul, outside of the fleshly, earthly circumstances. We can absolutely have that answer in Him when we recognize that, yes, I am a sinner. I am lost in my sin. I am alienated from God. I'm at enmity with God. But He knows it. He knows me. He wants me, and He's able to take care of it. The question is, will you trust Him? The woman at the well said yes. And by the way, we don't have time to get into it, but the Bible said, again, that, there'd be a spring of living water that overflows. What did she do? She went into town. She started sharing with everybody else. That spring that was in her was overflowing to other people. What God says is always true from the very beginning all the way through the end. We can take Him at His word. We can trust His promises. And so if you know you're lost, you can also know that you can be saved by faith in Jesus Christ.